Alrighty. Am I coming through alright?
Yes, you are. How you
Wicked. Yeah, not too bad, man. Yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm just working on actually a video. It's gonna be crazy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a really big, long video.
Yeah.
It's gonna be really. I think it's like I think it's gonna be one of the better videos on my channel. I haven't actually sat down to make a video in. I mean, it's probably been like 2 years. I've only put out like conversations. So.
Oh, what's the topic?
Well, don't tell everyone, because if you tell anyone, everyone's gonna start bugging me, and then it's gonna make me not motivate you. But
Yeah, that's fair.
it's a debate guide, ground up from literally no knowledge to my full system of debate. So
Fuck yes.
there's some repeat stuff for people who've seen my channel. Like, there's a whole propositional logic from the ground up in there. I'm not doing any other logics because the point is just to convey one, and then you'll be able to generalize to how you could work with others in the same way. But I want everyone to leave the video with a logic system. And for people who aren't like longtime viewers or otherwise know that kind of stuff, I want it to be in the video. But that's just a segment of it. Most of it isn't like, here's logic, that's just part of it. I'm doing, actually I don't want to give away all the sauce, but it's going to be quite good.
Nice.
I'll tell you the core insight, though, is that you can actually represent, because you'll get this, you're a CS student, you can actually represent a debate strategy as an algorithm. And I'm actually literally doing that and coding it.
Fuck yes.
Yeah, so I have this whole fucking thing. Anyway, there's a lot of other stuff to it, but it's gonna be a really good debate guide. So I think someone should be able to leave this video. They might need to study it a bit, but it's gonna be simple language. You don't need to understand a bunch of stuff. Any concept that gets used is gonna be explained. Just because it has the word algorithm doesn't mean there's gonna be a ton of crazy shit in there. But yeah, I want people to be able to watch it and leave with a good understanding of how to debate, and then be able to fill in the blanks for themselves. Like, you're still going to need to learn to actually get good at things like semantic analysis and debate, but like, this is going to give them the roadmap. So that's the idea.
Very nice, man.
As part 3. Yeah, it started as part 3 of that debate tips series, but I just found it getting so expansive, and then I was retracing I had waited too long since making those other videos, to the point that I found myself retracing that ground with all this new kind of detail, and I was like, wait, I'm kind of redoing those other oh, fuck, and then I was like, you know what? I think it's just time for a big, huge fucking video about this. And part of it is inspiration from people just debating so poorly, just watching debates. Like, I don't know if you saw Actual Justice Warrior and Emma Vigeland, and like, it was just horrible. And yeah, I don't know, I could go on, but yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Very nice. Yeah, it's definitely well needed, that's for sure. Yeah, if more people just understood how argumentation worked, we wouldn't have these frustrating issues with people just complete morons.
I mean, we definitely have less of it. You can still, I guess, have someone who's a complete moron who understands how argument works and is just a complete moron. But I mean, it'll reduce it. That's the idea. I just want to improve the discourse, and I want the people who want to learn to debate more systematically to actually be able to find a way to do that, instead of just kind of shot in the dark trying to replicate the styles of people who they see debating like that.
Yeah. Alrighty. So I'm just quickly writing the stuff that I've got in that document that I sent you via email. By the way, did you get it?
I did, but I haven't had time to read it, and I think you told me not to read it, actually.
Oh, the first one, definitely don't. That one's just garbage. Just gibberish. So I've decided to reword it so it doesn't have like idiolectic fucking shit in there. So it doesn't just read off as like consonantal, right? So the one that I've got now is a little bit more, what's the word? Tractable? Like intelligible, I guess. Which is definitely new for me, right? As I'm sure you will, well experienced with.
Are you recording right now, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I'm just recording. I'm not going to be doing a stream of it or anything like that. It's just going to be, yeah.
Just for your purposes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I don't. I think I have told you before, and I don't like saying silly. I don't want to be mean to anybody, but yeah, I do think you had a thing around just being hard to understand. I don't think it was just me who thought that, but I find sometimes if you're just honest and you say that to someone, then they'll be like, "Oh, I actually don't want that to be the case," and then they'll just work on it. Like, I don't know if you knew Arianus, but they kind of had a similar thing, just too much language. I guess some idiolect stuff too, like just using terms that, I mean, maybe idiolect isn't the right word, but their own, because it's not like literally proprietary language, but it like, stuff that you'd have to know a lot of the details of their thoughts to even understand. So you get this end result of most people just don't know what the fuck you're saying, and you obviously don't want that. So
Yeah, I was literally speaking to Arianas probably the other month or so. Yeah, like obviously they've improved fucking shit tons. They are like an immense force in debate. But yeah,
I don't actually. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I don't really keep up with what he's doing or like know him well or anything. But yeah, I did see him make a conscious effort to shift on that, and it was like noticeable.
Yeah, have you guys ever debated before?
I don't think so. I think we've like gone back and forth on things a bit in DM, but I don't think we've ever really had any meaningful disagreement about anything.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, with respect to debates, did you want to kind of like at least get this whole thing started? It may even be helpful.
You want to debate?
Oh, no.
You want to have it? Oh.
Oh, wait. Sorry, did I say debate?
You did. You said with respect to debate.
Oh, yeah. I mean, with respect to the topic of debates and stuff like that. You know how you talk about dragging the discourse down, right? Dragging them into the pits of hell, essentially, of semantic analysis. Like you can drag a conversation about empirics down to like the logic of one's epistemic framework, and then you can drag it further down to semantic analysis of terms, and that kind of thing. That's the general kind of topic, right? Like you have to be good at semantic analysis, and you have to be good at like logical analysis, propositional rolodexing, that kind of thing. Because that's sort of the topic here. That's the topic that I wanted to talk to you about, just to investigate and see if we can gain any sort of clarity on like this whole problem about like people can always ask, well, what's the premise? What's the argument for this? What's the argument for that? What's the argument for that? What's the argument for that? And like the similar problem of I don't have that concept, and so on and so on. So
right, I was about to actually point out the analogous one. You can do Y tunneling on a bunch of things, but yeah, the it's funny you mention this because these are I have like a log set graph that I'm building, and I have these under standard objections. So I am actually very prepared to have this conversation, but I don't. I'm doing this whole thing in detailed video form, so I'm literally talking to you about the stuff that I happen to be working on right now for this video, which is hilarious.
That's actually so it's perfect timing.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you'll hear it again in the video, but I don't mind. Like, it can be useful to go over it.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to put a specific question to me, or do you just want me to tell you generally my views on Y tunneling?
Yeah, what exactly are you referring to by Y tunneling? Is it just simply the regress of asking for X, Y, and Z?
Well, you can always ask the question why over and over again, and I think I view asking for the supporting premise over and over again, or doing semantic analysis on the words, and then on whatever words are given to explain those words over and over again. I just view those all as like variants of Y tunneling, but Y tunneling I think of as literally asking the question why to everything that the other person says. So just tunneling deeper and deeper on why. It's like what precepts do. Why, until you say, well, I don't fucking know, or you start gibberating if you're not able to detect when you don't know, and then they jump on you and either call out your gibberating or tell you or tell you, okay, well, Christianity, we do know, right? And you don't, so you can't say anything. Of course, they don't want you to follow up by asking them the same questions. That's not allowed. But, so Y tunneling, I think of specifically as asking why over and over to everything the person says, but I think of, like, premise tunneling and like semantic tunneling, it's all in the same family.
Okay. Now, with respect to like how, like why exactly do we drag the discourse down from like argument analysis down to semantic analysis?
Well, when you say why do we, now you're asking a psychological question. People could have different motivations. Are you asking, you want to know why I typically do that?
Yeah. Why do you typically do it?
To be clear, it is going from it is semantic analysis, right? Why do I do semantic analysis?
Yeah.
Well, because to evaluate the truth value of something, you first have to understand it.
Yeah, exactly. And if we struggle to understand whether or not like some given term actually does like have application conditions, or whether or not it does contribute to the truth conditions of a sentence, when you talk,
that I don't think exactly in those terms. I might be able to translate my thoughts to those terms, but I just think in terms of, do I know what it means?
Okay, no worries. Okay.
I'm not saying anything's wrong with what you said, but I would just use slightly different phrases.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm trying to stick to, trying to make it like, a shared language. Yeah. So
you can talk about application conditions. I just don't want to get the reason I say that is just because I don't want to accidentally commit myself to some specific theory of meaning.
Yeah.
I want to leave that open.
Yeah, I was watching over your the debate that you had with Thomas Bergadus, and I was like,
that guy, dude.
Yeah.
At that point, I didn't hate him, but you could tell I was getting annoyed. Now I fucking hate that guy. I think he's a piece of shit.
Yeah, that's fair, man. Look, so there's this quote, and I've written it down in the document. Yeah, so. Well, which one was it? I believe it was, if there's a term in your argument that doesn't make sense and someone can run a competent semantic analysis, you're never going to get to run your argument. And basically, you like Lance's approach because it's taking that exact angle. You just don't understand what the other person is saying. It's not overshooting by saying this is false when you don't even know what this is. Just give me the concept, right?
Yes, I agree with all of that. That's exactly my view.
Yeah. So then there's also the kind of like this question of how exactly do I give you the concept? Do you have any ideas? Like, I remember you proposing the whole phenomenological lexicon, right? But the question is, how exactly does a phenomenological lexicon help you grasp the concept? Of course, it gives us like a way to understand. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
We're doing too much there. So wait, there's two questions. Well, how does the phenomenological lexicon help you grasp the concept? That I'm not even sure I'm saying that's something it does. Let's talk about that in a second.
Okay.
The first thing you asked was, how do you convey the concept? So this is also specifically, I never say define that, right? I might say that by accident, but if the second that I don't even think I say it by accident, but if I ever do, I'm sure I'll correct if anyone ever starts trying this move on me. But the reason why I say that is because definition, what I need is to have the concept. Definition is one means to do that. Maybe there are other means. I'm leaving that open too and saying people can discover them. Some things that sometimes work are conveyance by example. Is there anything else off the top of my head? I don't fucking know. And one other thing. Oh yeah, so typically we just do exactly definition works most of the time, which is I get a bit skeptical. It's not a defeater, but it starts raising red flags when we can't do anything even close to definition, right? Like when you asked me what Y tunneling is, I didn't have any formal definition or anything like this. I just thought about the concept and just started describing the concept, and then you understood it. I just basically defined it, and maybe I gave an example or two, and then we were both on the same page, presumably, about it. So I think that's typically the kind of thing that happens, and I don't think philosophical discussions are an exception. I think that that's typically what happens in philosophy. But I think that there are certain times when people will say that that's not good, and I don't think that I don't have any reason to think they don't have a concept. Well, I often do lean in the direction of thinking they're gibberating, but it's logically possible they have a concept, right? So I acknowledge that we could just be in this situation where there's a conveyance problem, but they're not saying anything that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We can talk about the other thing you asked, but you might have something else to say by now, so I don't know if you still want to ask about that.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good segue to the next point. Basically, I was going to say that there's obviously certain terms that we don't have analyses for or definitions of, right? That we nonetheless understand and take for granted that they can feature in truth app sentences, right? So then the question is, how do we explicitly show that these terms have, in my terms, right, the application conditions, or they have their contributions to the truth conditions of a sentence, like even though we can't provide analyses or definitions for them, right? Obviously, those words, those types of words, like, I don't know, the color purple or desire, they don't trigger the red flag, but it still is like terms that are resistant to analysis, right?
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Are you just asking, are those terms that don't trigger the red flag but are resistant to analysis?
No. I'm asking why those words specifically. What's unique about these types of words that makes them not trigger the red flags?
Okay, so I think you might be. I'm not sure if you're asking this about me specifically, or if you're thinking in weird realist terms.
No. I'm just asking with respect to your view.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I thought you might have been thinking. Okay, yeah. Well, I'm not really sure. I'm kind of open on that. Like, I know I have. The vital thing is that I have those concepts, but why I have them, I don't know. I don't have like a theory about concept acquisition, and I'm not even sure. I don't think that's philosophy. I think that's probably psychology, concept acquisition, or maybe that even touches like neuroscience or something. But yeah, I don't have a. So why do I have? I could give maybe some general thoughts. Like, I mean, I've probably like encountered these. Like maybe I literally have no idea. Like whatever the standard view is you get in like psychology or something like that about how people acquire concepts, it's like that's probably why I have them. So you can tell by my answer, I don't have any specific view. I just know I have some concepts, I don't have others. And if you ask me why, it's like I don't really know. Like, but we might have theories about that in like psychology or something about how people acquire concepts.
Yeah.
Be careful also to distinguish when you're asking psychological from philosophical questions, because I'm basically, anytime you ask a psychological question, at best, well, that's not true. There's some things I do have opinions on, but you'll often get these answers from me that are like, I just don't know. I know that my psychology is this way, but when you ask the why is your psychology that way type questions, why do you have these values? Why do you have these concepts? It's like I can gesture at like I grew up in a society that like used those, and like I don't know, there's certain probably conditions about my environment that maybe, or my biology that dispose me to certain attitudes or beliefs, but like that's just me like spitballing. I don't really know. I just know that I am that way.
Yeah. I think the more important question though is like where exactly did we get the application conditions of certain terms? Not just simply where we got the concept or how, like what was the causal process that brought about the acquisition, right? I'm more so interested in what reason we have for believing that these specific concepts have application conditions and contribute to the truth conditions of a sentence. So in that sense, phrased that way, it can definitely be deemed more philosophical than psychological.
Why do well, we'll see. So let's just think about that sentence and try to understand it. So what is it again? Why do concepts have application conditions? There's more to it, but can we just start with that? Why
For sure, yeah. What reasons do we have to believe that certain terms like purple and desire have application conditions?
Well, wait, that's a different question. Are we asking...
Oh, okay.
Sorry, are we asking why they have application questions, or why... Now, I'm kind of confused. Is that an okay way to phrase it, or is there something wrong with how I just said it? Why do concepts have application conditions?
I think it's perhaps the way that it was being phrased, because like when you're asking why, it almost sounds like we're asking for some sort of like explanation, some sort of causal explanation or model of something. It doesn't need to be that, but just for the sake of specificity here, I'm more so interested in like what reasons we could come up with as to why things like the term desire or purple are meaningful, like ostensibly meaningful, but other terms that are purportedly fucking primitive, like stance-independent reason, why those are, like, ostensibly, and I think we'll both agree that they're ostensibly, we just don't know what the fuck they're talking about, right? So, what reasons do we have to believe that those first terms, purple and desire, are meaningful or, contribute to the truth conditions of a sentence? Sorry, was that any clearer, or was that just like obfuscating?
I'm just thinking about the phrasing. What reason do we have to think that a concept like purple has application conditions? Or let's just start with that before thinking about truth value. That's too much for me.
Sure.
Why do we think purple has application conditions? Okay, so what is an application condition? That's a way in which the word can be used such that, well, it's not, yeah, so a way in which the word can be used in a sentence correctly.
Yeah.
The application condition for purple wouldn't be met if I said that sounds purple. Is that the idea? Like, because things don't sound purple, there's like a category error there, so there's some problem, you're like applying it in the wrong condition.
Yeah, it's in that general that general range of things, but it's mostly about whether or not the terms refer to something or refer to just some gibberish, right?
Well, now we're talking about reference. What is the application? Is that
So
application conditions in terms of reference?
Yes, that's exactly how we're understanding it. We're understanding it in terms of reference.
So does application condition just mean having a referent?
Yes.
Why do terms like purple have reference?
Pretty much.
So what the fuck? Oh, that's my uncle. So let me just try to understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Why do concepts have reference? I don't think a lot, or really at all, about things like theory of reference. I don't know if I can think of something for that right away. So to have a referent, to refer to something, how doesn't that just mean that something generally, like, that people will hear it and take it to mean so and so? Like, if something's referent, so I guess this language of like picking something out, that's like when you're talking about the referent, like this term picks out this thing, the thing it picks out is the referent, like that's sort of the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time understanding how that's not a psychological question. It's like, I don't see why that's not equivalent to asking, why does this particular sound cause humans to think of this particular thing? It sounds like a psychological question.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where I was introducing the contributions to the truth conditions of a sentence, right? Where if we're trying to determine whether or not a sentence is truth apt, in terms of, well, its term meanings, but we don't have definitions for certain terms, we can still nonetheless take for granted that a word like desire, despite the fact that we don't have, a comprehensive analysis of it, right, still contributes to the truth conditions of a sentence, like in the cognitive anti-realist thesis for morality, right?
What is it to contribute to the truth value? Is that just to be able to participate in a sentence without making the sentence non-propositional?
That's exactly it, yes.
Okay, and what are you asking, or yeah, what's the question?
Yeah, so if we can't use things that are intralinguistic like definitions or analyses, but we're nonetheless using the term in a meaningful way, we have this intuitive sense of when the truth conditions of a sentence involving something like desire are satisfied, and when they aren't satisfied, we have some sort of like intuitive understanding of like when that sentence would be true. Like, say for instance, like I desire to eat an apple. We have some sort of intuitive understanding of when that sentence is satisfied of its truth conditions. But nonetheless, we don't have an analysis of desire to explicitly lay out its truth conditions. So in that sense,
there is no such analysis. I'm not committing to anything about like
oh yeah,
or something. I just don't have, don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
But
sorry, continue.
yeah, so independent of not having an analysis at the time being, we're still able to use it as if it did have truth conditions, and we still have like an intuitive grasping of it. And it's like, this is like non-linguistic, right? So I understand where it's like the impulse there is to shift over to psychological explanations, but I'm not even too sure if that's necessary, because we're still talking in like the.
I don't know if I had an impulse there to switch. The thing that made me think of psychology is you asked, why do terms have application conditions? It seems like all we meant by that is reference, and it seems like all that we mean by why does a term have a referent is why does this particular sound cause a human to have this particular mental state, like think of this particular thing, right? And it was that semantic analysis that led me to think it's a psychological thing. I forget what you just said, but I didn't detect in what you just said the thing that actually prompted me to think of it psychologically.
Oh, okay.
That prompted me to think of it psychologically was that semantic analysis on your question.
Yeah.
So when I did the analysis, the question just seemed psychological.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so it seems that whenever we're using a term like that, that there isn't some like linguistic sense that we have in mind, some sort of propositional sense that we're able to lay out.
Sorry, right there. There's not a proposition. What does that mean? There's not a propositional sense we can lay out.
So like the sense of a proposition, right? So whatever it's.
We can't like define it, or we can't give an analysis. We can't define it. Are you just saying that?
No. It just. I'm not going to commit to the whole can't, right? But I will say like.
Not at our disposal. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. So yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, just with respect to when we don't have an analysis on hand, we're still able to intuitively use it. We have this I don't know, there's this like mechanism, whether or not that is psychological or otherwise. Like say for instance, in terms of inference, you could probably say that a lot of the time, it's you can boil it down to like a psychological explanation of how humans do processing. But there's still some formal ways that we can kind of represent like a subclass of inference that's able to completely convey what's going on in that processing, such that it's not just simply a psychological topic. And what I'm trying to say here is basically, it's more of a question. Like, is there a way to do something similar with reference, where we're really just like tracking what the fuck we're talking about?
I have a hard time understanding that question.
Okay.
So, you want to say that inference is not that it's not a psychological concept. You want to, right?
No, not necessarily. We can talk about the psychological elements of like how we process inferential stuff, right? And you can do the same thing here, where we're trying to process what we're taking words to refer to, right? But we can also, in the same way as we can, just talk about inference in and of itself and see like what kinds of structural relations things can have inferentially. We could do the same thing to reference it, but I'm phrasing that like a question, like, can we do that with reference, or is reference just something only subject to the sciences?
So I understand with inference, we can talk about the psychology around inference, or we can talk about inference itself, which isn't a psychological concept. We agree about that, right? So with referent, you want to say we can talk about the psychology around reference, but referent itself is not a psychological concept, or doesn't need to be, or why can't we? Is there a way to think of it such that it's not, or something?
Or that if there's a way to kind of like model it, and not necessarily model it, but like to utilize reference, like the act of referring to stuff, in a similar way that we do with inference, right? Where it's not just simply talking about like the psychological basis for how we acquire concepts, or how, like, I don't know, humans like use specific types of gestures and stuff like that. You know, the whole interpretive dance stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like how we use these types of things to refer to things to show that, yeah, well, these things do have like things that they refer to, so it's not just gibberish. Basically, what we can do with inference is we can develop like a formal language for it. And what I'm asking is it possible to do the same thing for reference, so we can clearly demonstrate in the same way that we can demonstrate that a conclusion is true based on the truth of premises, like whether or not specific constituent terms refer to things. Can we do the same thing, like develop a formal language to explicitly show that?
I have a hard time picturing what exactly. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. You can make formal systems that'll do all sorts of fucking arbitrary stuff. Like you can make some formal system that codifies like rules about proper reference or something like that, and like conditions where it's met, and then represent those all as variables, make a whole nomenclature for it, and then be like, when like XYZ something, then this refers to that. Like, there's some way to like formalize it, probably.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I'm not sure if that's really answering what you mean. You could formalize all sorts of shit. I don't. Yeah. So
Okay.
I don't know if I can give anything better than that.
That's fine. I think as long as we get to this kind of like vague understanding, I can run you through some sort of like intuition pump where it's like, basically showing that doing that would actually be of great use, especially for debates that have to be brought down to like the phenomenological lexicon level, right? So
It might not be fully converging on what that is. Like, are you talking about some kind of formal system that, like, instead of having like validity or soundness, it has like correctness of reference or something?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, and there's got to be some like conditions to be met for that to happen. So what is it? Just before talking about this, what is it that you want to get out of this? You want to be able to resolve some certain kind of thing that happens in discussion, presumably?
Yeah, well, I want to motivate some sort of further investigation as to the relevance of reference to like this issue of stalemate by regress, where we have to drag people down to like the next level and then the level below that. So what I've kind of detected is that reference is central to like all of these things from the level of semantic analysis downwards, because as soon as we realize that we're not going to resolve a regress of I don't have that concept, one of the most plausible ways to resolve something like that is to start asking, okay, can I see what the fuck you're talking about? Like, can you show me where this thing is present in XYZ experience? The example that you gave in, I believe it was the conversation with Joe Schmid, was the old lady getting stabbed. So the realist and the anti-realist both view an old lady get stabbed. Both of them agree that the old lady's being stabbed is bad, right? But what they want to attribute the badness to is something that they don't converge on, right? So one's going to say that it's internal, the anti-realist, and the other's going to say that it's non-internal. So we've got a contradiction there, right? But how the fuck do we resolve that kind of ontological disagreement?
Well, I don't know that we have a contradiction there. I think that we have different term usage. Like, I don't think that Joe and I are contradicting each other.
With respect,
I agree with everything else you said, but yeah.
So
it's not like there is this thing bad and we are disagreeing about what it is. We both understand and said in that discussion that we are using the words in particular ways. We're not theorizing about their general use or anything like that.
Yeah.
So when I say it's bad and he says it's bad, those two propositions don't form a logical contradiction. We just mean different things by it. He understands what I mean and I understand what I mean. he understands what he means and I don't understand what he means.
Right. But if we look at the discussion you have with Synth, say for instance, Synth brought up qualia. Now, irrespective of whether or not qualia is a thing, I'm open to eliminating it myself. I know that you are as well.
Well, to be clear, it's just going to depend how robust it is. Like,
Yeah.
it's a notion of qualia I'll accept, and if you start making it spooky, then I won't.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's say that qualia is some mode of perception. Let's say it's like just simply the perception of the old ladies getting stabbed being bad, right? So a realist would basically commit themselves to the content of that qualia being at least partly external, whereas the anti-realist will commit to that being like wholly reducible to internal content. So the contradiction there would be basically that all the content is internal, or some content is external.
I don't know that there needs to be a contradiction there. Okay, just to be clear, because we can talk about this, because I'm not sure I agree about this, but is resolving this point important, or is this kind of like beside the central thing you want to get at? Because this might turn into a discussion.
Yeah. So this is important.
Okay,
I can explain. I can explain if you'd like.
You can. I also just want to flag one thing. Do you understand epistemic contextualism?
I get a rough idea. It's like we from specific types of assumptions we can derive truths.
Yeah, we can just well, I could state what the view is, but because you are always concerned with this stuff around grounding, and that's still what you're concerned about in this conversation, obviously.
Yeah, I don't want it to devolve into that shit. That's not in my interest right here.
Okay, well, yeah, because the thing is, when it seems like you're concerned about there needing to be a way to resolve these things in principle, and I'm not that we don't have to talk about it, but I'm just not I'm not concerned about it because I don't think it comes at any cost to my view.
Yeah.
I think if someone tunnels me that I get into any trouble because I just say once I hit the base of the context, right? For any given proposition, it's a very nice position because you can just be like, well, yeah, okay, I can justify that, and as they remove more and more context, then at some point you just go, oh, okay, well now I don't know how to anymore. But it's not like I ever end up in a situation where I'm like, oh shit, like I have this thing and I can't justify. Like, I mean, obviously I could have a bad argument. That's a thing that can happen.
Yeah.
But I'm always if I'm out of justification, I've just hit the bottom of the context, and it's like, okay, so I can make my argument given this context. Below that, I'm not really sure. So I don't know. I guess I just there seems to be a motivating worry here that I just don't have, and contextualism is part of why I don't have it. So I just thought I'd like flag that because maybe it'll chip away at this worry that you have.
Okay. Could I get a little bit of clarity on what you think my motivation was?
It seems like you're worried about there not being, in principle, a way to resolve these kind of semantic non-convergences, divergences.
Right. I would say that, yeah, like, personally, I'm interested in it. I don't think that we need to find a way to do that. Obviously, really commonsensical, really easy to, universally graspable positions like your own, they're not going to run into any issues, like, for most purposes, right? Especially for any of your own goals. It's going to satisfy, like, literally all of them by design. So it's only with respect to niche types of conversations where we have this, like, intractable hang-up. And like you very well said in your discussion with Joe Schmid, that approaching this type of issue is better than leaving it up to what did you say? It was at least this issue is approachable. Oh fuck, where is it?
Well, I can say one thing, which is that I don't actually grant that it's intractable. What I say is that it's logically possible for it to be intractable. I'm not
Yeah.
convinced that any of these are intractable. I suspect that, when I see just the kind of phenomenon you were talking about earlier, where Joe and I can have supposedly different concepts, yet use the language in a way that we perfectly communicate with each other, like, all the time, except when we start doing meta-ethics. Like, we can all be like, okay, rape is wrong. Let's do political policy. Okay, we probably like morally wrong to have like slavery, and like we have all those conversations. Just there's no problem that shows up until we start talking about fucking meta ethics. That just seems to me like we probably have the same concept in different language. So it seems like it's just a language barrier. So I actually, not only do I not think it's intractable, I lean in the opposite direction, thinking it is tractable, but people, including myself, are just lazy about trying to solve it. So maybe you're doing something.
Oh.
But no, with what you said, I want to point out, I'm addressing the idea that it is in principle irresolvable, and I'm just saying if you have contextualism there, that I want to say that'll be alleviated, but now I'm not sure about that. One second. Yeah, there's not a fear about getting Y-tunneled yourself if you have contextualism, I guess. But if the idea is just you'd like to like progress the dialectic and try to devise strategies to get beyond those things, I definitely get that. But if the fear is at all about you, quote, grounding your worldview, this sort of semantic tunneling showing that your view is ungrounded, and then creation of this methodology being ultimately, for finding proper reference, being ultimately about answering that kind of semantic regress and ultimately about your view being grounded, if that's the kind of thing, then I would say you should think about contextualism, because it gives you the kind of in principle reason that that's like not a problem, and thinking in contextualist terms might do you some good there, I guess. But we're kind of going away from directly what you were talking about. I just wanted to flag it.
Yeah. I think it's important. It's definitely because like one of the things I need to clarify is obviously I don't think that the quote unquote issue is intractable, like permanently. Like there's and there has to be some sort of in principle way of resolving it for any purpose. Like that's definitely not something I'm going to commit to. But there's something interesting in what you were saying before. It seems like. Would you say that these types of like meta-ethical disputes, metaphysical disputes are just merely verbal, or do you think some of them are at least substantive? I can explain what those mean.
Oh, I know what you mean, and I mean substantive is in we're disagreeing about the truth value. Verbal meaning we're not. It's just a semantic dispute, right? Like that's what people normally mean by verbal dispute, semantic dispute.
Not necessarily, because there's like certainly when it comes to saying that a specific term has a referent, we're talking about something substantive in terms of like whether or not that thing exists. But then again, you can say that well, that's just a proposition. Whether or not that has a truth value is is the question in at issue, right? But verbal dispute, I just mean disagreements that are resolved by settling facts. Just simply about like what specific people, like individually in terms of private, like what you intend it to refer to, or what a collective of people intend it to refer to. But whether or not it has a referent is a different question from that kind of verbal dispute, because it's just yeah.
Wait, so just to be clear, a dispute with content is when we're disagreeing about truth values, right?
I'm unclear on what you mean by that sentence.
Well, the way people typically use these terms, like verbal dispute and dispute of substance, a dispute of substance is when two people are actually disagreeing about the truth values of something. So, like, if I think that the moon is made of cheese and you think it's made of cashews, then we have a substantive dispute. We're not merely meaning different things by moon and not actually disagreeing with what each other are saying. We're actually, given the same proposition, taking different attitudes towards its truth value. That's what a substantial dispute normally is, and a verbal dispute is just kind of when you have this appearance of disagreement, but there isn't a substantial dispute. So that's like all of these cases where it's just a language thing. Like it just seems like we're disagreeing because I'm interpreting you incorrectly, or that's the most common. But yeah, that's sort of the separation. Is that not how you mean it?
Yeah. Like, you can definitely reduce what I'm saying when I'm talking about the substantive thing to the truth value stuff, right? So, yeah, like, when you're asking whether or not, like, a certain referent exists for a given term, no matter how depending on, of course, how you're using it, that turns into a substantive thing because, like, we're asking, does X referent exist? That's a propositional claim, and that a question about that is going to be about the truth value of that proposition.
Okay. Well, yeah, but you're not disagreeing with me about what classifies a dispute as verbal or substantial. The difference is whether it's a dispute about the truth value of something, or whether we actually don't know that we have any different doxastic states. We're just using language in different ways, leading to the appearance of disagreement. That we agree about. That it sounds like you're just agree about that. It sounds like you're just pointing out that there's deceptive cases that seem verbal but aren't. Right? It's like, like we're disagreeing about term meaning, but really, once we do investigation, if we're framing it in this referent language, maybe we're actually having a substantive dispute about whether the proposition. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were actually trying to say you disagree. Classification. You're just pointing out a kind of counterintuitive example where it seems verbal but isn't. Yeah, that's fine. So I do think that a massive amount of disputes in metaphysics are verbal. I think a lot of it's probably worse in metaphysics than like anywhere else in existence, but it's also just common in like philosophy generally. Just metaphysics is like the spookiest area of philosophy. But yeah, I think it's verbal. And to use the word you like, I think that these things are kind of spawned of a lack of clarity at the level of meta-philosophy.
Jesus Christ, you've mirrored my language too well. Okay. Yeah. So, that's the thing. With respect to the realist / anti...
I should add to...
Yeah, go on.
I should add to that, because like this is the view that like I take, or that Lance takes. Lance could like go on about it because he's like very, it's a big thing for him. But like for instance, with someone like Joe Schmid or like Alex Malpass, I don't think that there's any getting anywhere. I don't think they can I shouldn't say that, because there might be a way to, like, if we really did do this kind of work. Let me be clear. I'm not actually saying that there's no way for us to converge, but we're not going to converge by like. Sorry, this isn't a good way to say it. I want to say that people like that have a different meta-philosophy. Like, I don't take realism really to be like a moral position or a linguistic position, or like there's these contexts where you see realism, like realism about term meaning. There's correct term meaning. Realism about morality. There's a correct morality. And correct here is like stance independently true, whatever. So I don't take realism to, like, I think of realism as an approach, as a meta-philosophical approach that people like Joe or Alex take. And I just think about these cases as specific instances of that meta-philosophy. So I don't think we can resolve this at the level of talking about like applied ethical questions or normative ethics or even meta-ethics. I think we have to talk about meta-philosophy to actually get around the issue, if there's a way to.
No shit, I've literally been preaching this point since like fucking 2017. Holy fucking shit. Oh my god, it's so refreshing to hear someone else say that. Oh my god. But yeah, I've loved...
For a while.
Sorry?
Lance Independent. I didn't, no pun intended. Lance Independent converged with you on that.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. It's absolutely so. Oh god, it's so good to hear as well. But yeah, it's fucking true. But when we're talking about like the metaphilosophical level, we're talking like about the philosophy of philosophy. We're talking about like the metaphysics of philosophy. So again, it's like, how do we talk on this metaphysical level in some sort of like principled way? Again, we're gonna start.
I don't share your worries there.
Yeah, no, there's no worries here or anything like that. It's just a point of interest, right? Where it's
I don't mean it like you're deeply distressed. I just mean I don't have a concern of like I think we can use a lot of normal language when we talk about metaphilosophy. Just like when we talk about logic, we have the object language, maybe propositional logic for simplicity sake, and then we have the meta language.
Yes.
The meta language usually uses some like Greek characters instead of the English ones that the object language uses. The meta language might have whatever. The meta language is a little different. It's a language for talking about the logic, right? So I agree we might need to create some like metaphilosophical lexicon or something to be able to like navigate that territory really efficiently. But I don't think that metaphilosophy is like, I'm not sure if you're implying this, but I don't think it's this place that like the second we talk about metaphilosophy, we like don't have any of our tools and we're like a level above level below, or however you want to think of it. So we're just like fucked for talking about. Like, I definitely don't think anything like that. I think we can use our tools just like we do with logic, and we might need to create certain metaphilosophical language or whatever. But like, just to take an example to make this clear, it's very common to see debates in philosophy. Like, I'm sure you'll notice this when you're doing CS, but you take philosophy courses, right? Like, you do philosophy in school?
No, I will be doing philosophy next year though.
Okay, well, you're going to, and I mean, you've read some philosophy, so, and you're going to do philosophy in school too. So you'll see or have seen this surely already. But it's very common to see two philosophers having different kind of disagreements at the same time without realizing that it's happening.
Yeah.
So they'll be disagreeing about. Well, there was a good one I had in an ethics class at one point. It was whether the, I forget what they called him, but it was like the happy psychopath, like the guy who's like totally psychopathic, treats everyone like objects, but just like is very content doing this, whether he is truly happy, right? So I forget what he was actually called. It wasn't the happy psychopath, it was something like that. So there's these philosophers going back. You have to read this whole like dialectic between them, and it's very obvious that they're flipping around between arguing about what the correct meaning of happy is, or whether, given some particular meaning of happy, he is happy. And that when they're talking about what the correct meaning of happy is, there's a lack of clarity about whether correct here means captures public meaning correctly, or whether it means it captures our like idealized norms or something. Like, if we became aware of all the cases that we would like use this concept in, how would we conceptually engineer it? Because for the record, my view is like we're kind of always doing like conceptual engineering or ordinary language philosophy. We're usually doing one of these two things, where we're like, let's try to understand what people mean by this. Or we're going, okay, let's craft an understanding for this. And sometimes we go back and forth. We're like, oh, the public concept is like this, but it needs these adjustments. So we do a little ordinary language philosophy, and then we do some conceptual. So I think it's very common to read these disputes where it's like, okay, so in this one, there is a lack of clarity around whether they're disagreeing about what happy means, or whether he is happy given a particular meaning. And sometimes they're just talking right past each other, using just different definitions of happy. And then in terms of settling the question of what is the correct definition of happy, to the extent that they're actually talking about that, well, then there's these other questions. But what do we mean by capturing the correct definition? Does that mean capturing public meaning? Does that mean capturing sort of the meaning that fits our idealized meaning as far as we can tell? So this is all metaphilosophical fusion. Right? This is like we're having a philosophical conversation without having clarity about what it is. It's like different approaches to philosophy, and we're not noticing that we have them, and it's leading to confusion. So anyway, I'm just trying to give that as an example of how you can have a meta-philosophical problem, right? So it's a problem about the two philosophers approaches to philosophy, right? Are they like doing this kind of like ordinary language philosophy? Are they right? There's just kind of questions about how they're doing philosophy here, and there's a lack of convergence there. But we can talk about that all in like normal philosophical language, unless you want to debate whether that's a metaphilosophical dispute or something. But like, if you think it is, then there's a case where we're like talking about it in normal language. So we don't need some like crazy lexicon to start like navigating that territory and finding problems and like plugging the stuff.
Sorry, I think you cut out that last bit. What was the last thing you said?
Oh, I said we don't need to have like, we don't need to do a bunch of work beforehand to like start navigating that territory and like plugging all the holes we find and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it always depends on what the purpose is, right? So when it comes to things like mathematics, obviously you need to have some set of axioms that you're working from. So that would be a requirement for that kind of project, given that that's your purpose. Yeah, actually, I'd probably say that is more aligned with what my purpose is. And here's something interesting. I kind of picked up in what you were saying. Obviously, like, we know the distinction between public and private language. It feels like perhaps like we can add a third category to that, which is like language for like formal, like mathematical purposes, right? So given a set of axioms or given a set of definitions, like what follows or what is consistent with, that kind of thing. And it seems like something like that would be more compelling than working from, I don't know, something that just bottoms out in psychology or sociology, like public or private language. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure I fully get that. I don't...
Okay.
What is the public-private distinction? Is it actually a dichotomy?
Oh, I'm not sure if it's a dichotomy, but it's definitely something that's used in distinction to basically separate whether or not the type of meaning, and even kind of like sets out like the purposes of a conversation. If you're talking about a given person's private meaning, it can either determine whether or not we're trying to convince that person or whether that person is trying to convince us, type thing. Like it can be used for that kind of purpose. But if it turns out to be a public meaning or public language, then it's like it tells us that the conversation is very likely going to involve a lot of like empirical stuff, that kind of thing. So like it's using distinction there, right? It's like it will either tell us whether or not we need to outsource some empirical data or whether we won't. But I think it may also be useful to draw this third category where it's like, okay, we don't need to kind of like outsource like extra empirical stuff, but we're also not necessarily talking about just simply private meaning, because we're talking on like a purely formal level. It's like a weird blend of public and private. Like say for instance, like the number one, what we take the word one to mean. It's weird. It's kind of like both a mixture of private and public, right? Does that make sense?
Well, I honestly, I would need to like read about private and public language. I've never actually read about it. I thought private language is like just the language where things refer to what you want them to, and then public language is like where it refers to something that's somehow publicly determined. I don't know. I don't really know that topic, so I don't really have any thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, just based on the way you use it, I think the way that you intuitively use it should be sufficient just for these purposes to kind of like get an understanding of...
Oh, I when I use that term, I don't mean it in the way Wittgenstein used it. When I say public meaning, I'm talking about what the general public takes something to mean. I don't know what Wittgenstein meant when he said it.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. But yeah, so... let me actually try and retrace something, because I wanted to tie this back to another point. Yeah, sorry.
Also, I should get back to working in a few, but we can talk again at some point. Like, I'm happy to talk to you. I like talking. I'm just doing a lot, but like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go in a few here, but I'm sure you want to talk about. We can like talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So, fuck. I'll just quickly wrap it up then. Basically.
Do you remember as friends on here, Darren?
Sorry.
Are we friends on here? Yeah. You have friends on here. You can always like message me also. Like I don't. If it's lengthy, there's limits to what I can do, but I can. You can message and I can reply a bit there. Sometimes I'll send messages and stuff. There's a few people I do that with, so we can communicate a bit like that. I'm sure we can speak again verbally at some point. But yeah, sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I was just going to say...
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't cut you off, but the reason I say that is because it sounds like you're trying to figure this out, and or at least get feedback and stuff, and I don't want you to not be able to get that, but I also have a bunch of shit going. I want to make myself like available within reason. I don't want you to think that you can't get help because I'm busy. So
for sure, man.
Message me a bit, and we can definitely talk at some point in the future.
All right, yeah, that's perfectly cool. Of course, I'll make anything that I message you with as concise and as intelligible as possible. At least in contrast to my other shit.
You sound very intelligible today. I think that I remember there was a time when I had a hard time understanding what you're saying. So I don't know if it's just thinking more about philosophy or if it's computer science forcing you to think rigidly, but yeah, you definitely sound like pretty clear. I feel like you also sounded clearer last time. I feel like this has been a trend, but now I don't think I would even think to describe you as like hard to understand or anything like that.
Yes, that is progress. I've been working hard on that. I've been working on that, like, literally with everyone that I know, and so I've been especially working with my girlfriend, and she's been helping me a lot with making my shit way more intelligible.
Good. Yeah, the biggest key, there's a few, but, like, there's just some mistakes that so many people do. Like, one is using big words. I always go for the smaller words. But using big words comes off like you're in grade 10 writing like an essay.
Yeah, literally. It has the exact opposite effect. It makes you look sophomoric as fuck.
Exactly. Yeah, and it makes you harder to understand. If I have a choice between a big word or a small word, I always pick this. And then the other thing is just focusing on concision. Basically, the whole idea is to pack as much meaning as possible into as small a space as possible with as basic of words as possible. And you can always work on this. Like, I'm not trying consciously to do this all the time, but like I put a lot of effort into the point that when I have these debates, if I need to get something out in a clear linear sentence that I can repeat over, force the other person to respond to, I can like do that, right? So yeah, those are the big things. Trying to shorten, getting the most concise chunk of language possible with the most dense meaning that uses the simplest word possible. Those are the three like things to focus on.
Yeah.
I think you're actually already above the like you've always had an understanding of, like, even with your explaining, I think you're now probably better than people at explaining. But if you want to try to get like really good at being really clear, those are things to focus on. From someone who because people always say like, oh, hey, why you can explain things so well, you give such good clear explanations. Well, to whatever degree you want your explanations to have the kind of character mine have, the main things I focus.
Oh, you're cutting out.
Oh, I was just saying, to whatever degree you want your explanations to have the kind of character mine have, which you might not, you might have other interests too, but to the degree that you want that, the main things I focus on are those three things I mentioned. Length of sentence, amount of meaning in sentence, simplicity of words in sentence.
Yeah. It's also like, it takes way more skill to actually do that than it takes to just simply throw in a bunch of incomprehensible big words. Right? Mm-hmm. It's like speaking with Victorian language is like, why the fuck would you do that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, I won't hold you. I won't hold you back. But I think we should pick up the conversation on the whole internal versus non-internal content, whether or not that's substantive or a verbal dispute. That definitely sounds like like it could easily segue into the rest of the document. And it may actually be helpful next time around whenever you're available again, if we actually go through the document and just kind of get your takes on the types of thought experiments that I provide in the document, because it'll be way easier to kind of like track where I'm going with stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So yeah, just well, you said you wanted to touch on some topic, but then I cut you off. So if you want to hit that last thing you wanted to say.
Yeah, it was just simply the internal versus non-internal content stuff. So I am inclined to think that there is some sort of substantive dispute with respect to trying to describe or accurately represent what a specific thing refers to, or what a specific term refers to. So when Synth says that like a specific thing is bad, versus what you're saying when you're saying a specific thing is bad, what you understand the badness to refer to there can either refer to something that's internal versus non-internal, right? And what's in dispute is whether that non-internal stuff exists, right? So there's like a verbal kind of disagreement about whether to assign internal versus non-internal, but whether or not the non-internal stuff exists is of course a substantive dispute. So there's two layers. There's like internal, there's the verbal, and deeper to that is the substantive.
Okay, yeah, assuming that there is some coherent proposition about some externally existing thing that we can disagree about, then yeah, that'll be substantive, but we would have to do a bit of like analysis to see if that actually is the case.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be that the analysis also just like if you ask someone like Joe, they'll say that there's, well, external might be a weird word to use. They'll say it stance independently true, but the thing is, say that you have a sentence like X is stance independently true, and then you start doing analysis on X, and X actually breaks into like 5 different concepts, and like 2 of them are things that we actually both agree are stance independently true, but it's like some other feature that I think is psychological getting like mixed in with that and said to be stance independently. You know, so it could be that once we start getting serious about doing that analysis, we do find aspects that are stance independent. But I'm not going to grant that there's any weird shit that's stance independent, but I'm just saying that we could do that kind of analysis, and then it could turn out that the thing that it initially seems like there's one thing that we're disagreeing about whether that exists stance independently or not, actually decomposes into a range of concepts, which we would then categorize in the same way. And it was their aggregation into this kind of shitty, fuzzy umbrella that's leading to. You can have things like that too, right? So yeah. I'm also open to that, where it's so it seems not substantial. Then when you do semantic analysis, there's a stage where it seems substantial, because now you're going, okay, it seemed like a verbal dispute, but we are disagreeing about whether the external thing exists. But then we do more semantic analysis, and the external thing breaks into like 5 external things, or 5 things that we classify in the same way with respect to being internal or external, in which case it was ultimately semantic. So I'm not saying I think that's any more likely or something. Wait, do I think that's more likely? I do actually think that's pretty likely, to be honest. But
yeah.
I'm just pointing out that's also like a possibility.
For sure. Yeah. Can I wrap it up with the thought experiment that I posed on the first page? Okay. So this same type of thing where it's like we can pose some sort of semantic analysis on the realist terms. And it may just break up into more terms that would be questionable and stuff like that, right? Let's
break into more terms that aren't questionable, that we categorize in the same.
Yeah, true. But in terms of describing things like stance-independent reasons, you're going to have to involve other things that are stance-independent and normative, which are going to be questionable, right?
No, wait, you're losing.
Oh, wait, division fallacy.
I guess you're trying to build a hypo, so I shouldn't interrupt. But you are losing me there, and I don't.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's the division fallacy. Never mind.
I don't know what that means.
So basically, just because some sort of constituent... Okay, so one of the examples that I read most recently was in describing knowledge by acquaintance, where it's basically... knowledge by acquaintance is some form of like non-inferentially justified knowledge, right? Let's not turn into an epistemological thing. I know you have issues with non-inferential justification, schmustification, that kind of shit. But basically, Richard Fumerton in his 1995 book basically says that the acquaintance relation is a non-epistemic relation, but direct acquaintance is an epistemic relation, right? But direct acquaintance is basically three types of acquaintances that have to all happen at the same time. We have acquaintance with a fact, that X, acquaintance with a thought, that X, and acquaintance with some sort of correspondence that holds between the thought and fact, that X, right? Now, just because the individual components of acquaintance there are non-epistemic doesn't mean that the resulting tripartite model doesn't therefore become epistemic.
You mean the fallacy of composition?
Yes, that's it.
That's called the fallacy of division?
Yeah. Well, that's how Richard Fumerton called it. It's like composition division fallacy.
It's common. It might also be called the fallacy of division, but that's commonly called the fallacy of composition, where you assume the whole must have some property, all the parts have it.
Yeah, I didn't recall. I didn't have those terms on hand at the time. But yeah, I do understand it as being the composition division fallacy, or just the composition fallacy, right? Sure. But yeah, okay. So quickly going through the thought experiment. Sorry about the derail. My bad. That's totally my bad.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say that this issue of semantic analysis, well, not issue, right? But this whole semantic analysis thing can be applied to cognitive anti-realists who are sympathetic to metaphysical illuminativism, let's say, okay?
Wait, you're losing me 1 second.
Yep.
What is a cognitive anti-realist?
So an anti-realist...
Cognitivist and an anti-realist.
Correct.
Okay, right. And what about them? This is applicable to a cognitive anti-realist who is what? Can you just continue from there?
Yep, sympathetic to metaphysical illuminativism. So anything that's metaphysically spooky or metaphysically thick, they're going to be inclined to eliminate.
Oh, so like my position.
Correct.
Okay. Right.
So so the thought experiment basically goes: suppose you're debating a moral naturalist, the trivial type of moral realist, who's also an eliminative materialist, who is a Cronenberg monstrosity morphing the worst of Sam Harris and the Churchlands together in one person. As such, they're inclined to eliminate attitudinal states like desire in virtue of them seeming metaphysically thick or spooky. If this realist is able to perform a competent semantic analysis on desire as used in arguments for cognitive anti-realism, the realist will have the same problem as any other realist, even if we deflate said realist stance.
The realist will have the same problem as any other... You mean that... I thought it was the anti-realist.
Yeah, the anti-realist will have the same problem as any other realist. I mean, not for the purpose of, like...
Realist.
Yeah.
You said realist both times, so I lost you. I understand it. You said the wrong word by accident.
Oh, yeah, that's possible.
Okay. Yeah, right, because the anti-realist is the one who has this supposedly... Yeah, so basically the idea is there's someone who... I mean, we can spell out their exact position, but the point is just that they're skeptical of these kind of concepts like desire, which I have, and they start running semantic analysis on those, and then I say I don't have any. Something you want to ask about that?
Yeah, so basically how we break down these concepts and stuff like that, I know for absolutely most purposes of your own, it's not even going to be necessary because we already understand most people to share the concept of desire. But with respect to this type of moral realist whose position is just trivially just trivial, right? And it is comprehensible, but it just says so little, right? Or anything, it says so little compared to it's basically like saying almost something that an anti-realist would also accept, right?
Sure.
But this realist also thinks that anti-realism is unintelligible. So in the same sense that an anti-realist would say that their this realist position is like no different from theirs. This realist is doing the exact same, is pulling the exact same card to this anti-realist. Right? So then the question is, how do we deal with people like that? How do we provide concepts for things like desires for people who have that kind of eliminativist tendency?
Well, I don't really know. Like, if I were in a conversation, someone didn't have the concept of desire, I would probably take a few passes at it. Like, I'd probably be like, okay, do you means want something? So that's like one of the strategies.
Yeah.
You know,
when you're hungry.
Back to it. But if they're just going to respond to all of those things in the same kind of way that I respond to the realist, they're going to go, no, I don't have any of those. I don't know what want is. I don't know what longing is. Like, no, I don't have any of those things. And, you know, I try all the strategies that the person who has to convey the concept tries. You know, I don't know it in my head, but, you know, I try a few strategies, it doesn't work. Like, yeah, I'm just going to pretty much give up. Like, I'm not saying everyone should give up. There's probably people who are motivated to think about kind of questions. But for me, if you're asking how should we deal with something like that, I think by trying to convey the concept, and then if we fail repeatedly, then, I mean, in my case, giving up, because I don't care. But I don't care. Well, I do care, but not enough to spend time.
Yeah.
I'd rather work on other things like debate.
That's fair, man. That's fair.
For people, for humanity broadly, like what someone should do is they should try to do the kind of strategies I've proposed, bridging the gap, which is, it's all basically to deal with these meta-philosophical divergences, stuff like the phenomenological lexicon. You know, I don't know, like I'm not really sure. So I guess my answer is, I would try a few methods of conveyance, and then if none of them worked, I would give up. But I would hope that there's some other people out there who actually dedicate their career in philosophy, like these kinds of questions, and try to solve things like this. And I suspect that something like that will be successful eventually. Because my intuition. I don't know. I guess it is justification. I would go a lot of. My belief is that it is just a semantic thing, and we aren't having different. It's all the same. We're describing it. So I tend to think that when someone does put in that time, maybe it'll be a group of people, that we will probably get around that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's a good way to kind of wrap up the conversation then. So basically, yeah, it would be cool, right, if we did have some. And I know, just like how you said it would be cool if moral realism was true, right? It'd be useful to be able to say that economists are objectively wrong for X, Y, and Z reason, right? In the same kind of sense, it would be cool if we had some sort of in-principle way of resolving these types of conceptual disparity type issues that cause like regress and circularity to make things incomprehensible, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So that's perfect. That segues into the next part of the conversation. So then the question is, when would be the next time you're available?
I mean, you could try me maybe like next weekend. I likely can make some time, maybe the weekend after that. But like, just, you know, weekends are usually better.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, hope to have more conversations in the future for part 3.
Yeah, man, of course. It's good talking to you. Have a good one, Darren.
Yeah, you too, man.